is a total of 76 photos. We have selected 15 photos for our presentation. Only 11 photos pertain to the autopsy itself. And that will be State's Exhibit 1134. And with regard to Mr. Omari Ray, we are entering State's Exhibit 1135, which is a total of 58 photos, and we have selected 11 photos for our presentation. And just so the court knows, in addition, we have redacted 2 photos regarding Omari Ray. Those 2 photos had medical intervention, such as a chest tube and one had an incision, and we redacted that on the photo as attached to State's Exhibit 1135. All right. Okay, I swear on the witness. Doctor, if you will, do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to present for this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So I do. Please be seated. And if you will, can you speak your full name and spell your last name?
Jonathan Eisenstadt, E-I-S-E-N-S-T-A-T.
Doctor, we're not going to go through your qualifications at this time. We'll do that when the jury comes in. What we're doing at this point is I'm just going to show you State's exhibits that we both discussed and you selected. And I would just ask if you could look at the monitor and whatever the photograph depicts, you can explain to the court why you selected this particular photo.
Sure.
May I begin?
Yes. Get those slides, please.
Doug, I'm going to start with the photographs selected for Mr. Omari Ray. I'm starting with State's Exhibit 1106.
So this photograph was chosen because it is our identification photograph. It's taken on every case to identify the individual as well as the case number that will be associated with that individual throughout the case.
Thank you. Next photo is State's Exhibit 1107, corresponding to gunshot wound A and B.
Yes, it's hard to see on the screen right now because of the light, but what you'll see here is on the right side of his neck, if you essentially, do you want me to touch the element?
Do you?
Thank you. Great, thank you very much. Okay, that's good. So, throughout the autopsy, what I do is we photograph any injury that's identified. And here we will see an entrance gunshot wound on the right side of his neck. And it's a little difficult to see right now, but there are 2 defects here. And this is an entrance and an exit gunshot wound, which is in the report as D.
In State's Exhibit 1108.
So this is the exit gunshot wound that corresponds to gunshot wound A, the entrance on the right side of the neck.
Thank you. Next photograph, State's Exhibit 1109, corresponding to gunshot wound B.
So his body has been rolled now, and he's lying face down, and we have 2 defects, again, which correspond to each other, and they're the entrance and exit of gunshot wound B.
next photograph is State's Exhibit 1110.
So now we're actually down on the left arm. The belly would be up here. This is his left arm. His left elbow would be in this area. And this is gunshot wound C. This is the entrance.
In State's Exhibit 11 and 11, and just so the court knows, the little sticky notes that you are seeing on the photographs, they're going to be removed. That's just for my understanding of what these wounds represent.
So this photograph, now if you think about turning the arm over and you're in the area, what we call the antecubital fossa, where they put in IVs when you go to the hospital sometimes, that's this area. If you bend it, the elbow's in the back. This is the exit wound that corresponds to that entrance we saw further down on the forearm. So that's exit wound C.
State's Exhibit 1112, and this corresponds to gunshot wound E.
So it's a close-up right now, but we're actually on the back, and this would be an exit gunshot wound on the back.
And State's Exhibit 1113.
So now we're at a further distance. We take photographs from a distance and then move in closer, so we have an orientation. And this is the prior exit gunshot wound we just looked at, and here is another exit gunshot wound. So 2 exit gunshot wounds on the back.
State Exhibit 1114, entrance wound of gunshot wound F.
So if you look at this area right here, this is the buttock, and this is the right buttock, and this is an entrance wound on the right side of the buttocks.
And State's Exhibit 1115, exit wound of gunshot wound F.
So to keep the orientation, now we've flipped the body back over, and that's why we're still actually looking on the right side, even though it's on the other side of the picture now. And this is the exit wound that corresponds to the entrance on the right buttock.
State's Exhibit 1116, entrance wound of gunshot wound G.
So here you can see that we are on the left arm. This is the armpit, and this is the entrance wound for a gunshot wound G.
Exit wound and re-entry wound, State's Exhibit 1117.
So in this photograph, he's again face down, and if you recall, this would be the left arm. The entrance wound would be out here. This is the exit wound, and then the bullet, it's difficult to see on this photograph with the lighting, but it re-enters right here. So essentially it goes in the lateral aspect of the arm, out the medial aspect of the arm, and then back in to the left side of the chest.
And those are all the photos involving Omari Ray, autopsy photos. With regard to photos involving Officer Gunshot. Starting with State's Exhibit 1123.
So again, as I stated previously, we take identification photographs. And just of note, the identification photographs are taken after I've already done my external exam, because I want to document everything that I see of evidentiary value, and then I will clean the face and take the identification photograph. So this is Officer Christian and the case number associated with his case.
And next photo is State's Exhibit 1124.
And this goes to what I was just saying, how we won't do the identification photograph until we've documented everything. And one of the first things we do after we x-ray the body is we'll open the body bag and we will do overall photographs as that person is received in our office. And this is one of those overall photographs. Again, we see the placard with the case number, and this is exactly how Officer Christian was received in my office.
State's Exhibit 1125, Gunshot A.
So we see a few things here. The reason that this photograph is taken prior to removing any of the clothing is because we have a demarcation of what's called pseudo-stippling. Pseudo-stippling comes from objects other than the gunpowder that is called an intermediary object that will cause injuries to the individual, and is demarcated right there at his collar line. So two things we see. We see the pseudo-stippling on the left side of his face, and then right behind the ear here is gunshot wound A, entrance of gunshot wound A.
And State's Exhibit 1126.
So now we're documenting the same injury, but now we've removed the clothing, we've cleaned the body, and it's a better photograph of the entrance of gunshot wound A and the pseudo-stippling.
And State's Exhibit 1127.
So now he's been rolled over onto his stomach, and this is the exit wound that corresponds to the entrance of gunshot wound A.
State's Exhibit 1128, Gunshot wound B.
So here again, before moving any clothing or looking at the internal aspect of the body, we see that there's a defect on the left side of his shirt.
State's Exhibit 1129.
And in a case where there's clothing, I will remove each layer of clothing individually to continue to document the pathway. And this is his black undershirt. If you look up here at the top, this is his vest, and this is the entrance wound for gunshot wound B that we saw went through the shirt, his uniform shirt, and then it's going through the black undershirt here.
Sorry, is that 1129?
Yes, sir. 1129. State's Exhibit 1130.
So now the clothing has been removed. I've already documented the important aspects, and I've now cleaned his body, and this is the actual entrance on his left side of his chest for gunshot wound B.
State's Exhibit 1131.
So this bullet did not exit the body. It stayed in the body, and the most significant injury that it caused was to his aorta. The aorta, excuse me, is the largest vessel in the body. It's the artery that takes all the blood from your heart and disperses that oxygenated blood to the remainder of your body. And if we look right here, there's a perforation or a hole right through that, and that corresponds to gunshot wound B.
And just one more question, were you able to visibly see this injury during your external examination?
Not during the external, no.
Okay. And did it require you to actually make incisions and go inside his body to see this injury?
Yes.
And lastly, State's Exhibit 132.
So, as I stated, we always do x-rays of bodies where there's a suspicion of a penetrating injury prior to opening the body bag. And again, it does not project well on this screen, but this is one of those x-rays, and the bullet, when we look at the actual photograph, we'll be able to see it better, but there's a little, what we call hyperdensity, so it looks more white, and that's the actual bullet, and that bullet is lodged in the area of the 10th thoracic vertebra.
On the front, there's one additional photo, and that's State's Exhibit 1133.
So, as I was saying about the pseudo-stippling on the face, he as well had this area of pseudo-stippling on the right arm. So we can see his torso, his chest, this is the armpit, and the right arm coming here. The elbow is in this area. So there's a rectangular shaped area just above where the elbow would be of pseudo-stippling.
That concludes the photos.
Mr. Hood, do you want, does that conclude your presentation as well, Mr. Oakoff?
Yes, sir.
At this point?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hood, you want to be heard on any of these?
Yes, sir. Briefly, back to Southern Council.
Yes. All right.
photo 1124. It's a 90-day photo. It has no evidential value because the picture is showing the same thing as the introduction pictures. Almost similar, the same thing. It's like that would be cumulative. And we look at 1125 and 1126 of the pseudo strip from glass. I think he said 1126 is the same, but it's a better photo. So,
I think the difference was the clothing was all from 26.
yeah, okay. I mean,
That's what my notes say.
1125
number 1125 and 1126.
1126.
He's saying they were the same view, but 1126 was a better version because he was cleaned up. If it's the same view, you're showing the same thing, let's just show the better view because we're showing the same thing. And we'll look at 1128, 1129, 1130. It's a similar view of entry of wound B. We're asking that they only show 1130 because we're basically talking about the same entrance wound. That would be cumulative if we just talking about the same wound here. So we were asked that they show a better picture of the wound.
I think the difference is they each show differently. 1128 is with all the clothing on. 1129 has the outer shirt off, showing his undershirt and vest. 1130 is with the clothing off, is what I have.
Yeah, the damage exposure will not help determine to the jury whether he was shot or not. We're not disputing whether he was shot. If we were disputing whether he was shot or not, hey, we can understand. But we only here for the wound because we already know he's been shot, and I'm not disputing. So, for those reasons right there, we would object to the photograph that I stated because it will be cumulative and it will be prejudice and it will outweigh and pervade the fact. I mean, we know he's been shot. You know, I've said it to the jury numerous times, so we don't have to prove that he's been shot. We can talk about the wounds and what caused the death because they're all across the board. I mean,
Anything else? That was all on Buddy Christian. Nothing on Mr. Ray.
I mean, I had a personal objection, me personally, but I console Miss Early here seems like they allowed to show the entry wound. I mean, the wound. You know, for me, I'd be objecting to every last one of them. But I just object to them for the record. That's for me. I don't want none of them to be shown on Miss Ray or Miss Christian, but you know, that's just my personal objection. But so they're going there on that.
The objection is noted for the record. I did find the photos that have been presented. I'm going to list each one of them. I find that they are relevant and not this. I believe they all show something different one way or the other. That's as unpleasant as it is.
Yes, sir.
So I will allow you to be admitted, the jury to see and the doctors testify about 1106, 1107, 1108, 1109, 1110, 1111, 1112, 1113, 1114, 1115, 1116, 1117. Also 1123, 1124, 1125, 1126, 1127, 1128, 1129, 1130, 1131, 1132, 1130.
I'd just like to ask you if everybody take a bit for the record.
This note.
Your Honor, did you admit on 11/18?
I didn't have 11.
Okay.
See if you left out something that is technically.
Mine stops at 11 on notes.
11/8.
Mr. Wilson goes to 11/17.
Well,
I've got 4 photos, 11/19 through 11/22 that are not autopsy photos or personal belongings of Officer Christian. I can show you, but they're not autopsy photos, but I can show you them if you like.
Sure, hit those lights together, please. Well, what about 11/18? Is that an error? You mentioned. $11.17 I have was gunshot wound G at the exit.
Oh, 11/18 is a diagram that the doctor prepared showing the different wounds in the body locations, but it's not an autopsy photo. I'll be happy to show it to the record.
You're intending to use that, I guess, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're saying that?
Yes, sir.
Why don't we go ahead and show it now, just so.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not really, I think that we'll just lay the foundation for that.
Yes, sir.
For anything else.
Yes, sir.
I just thought it'd be beneficial for just to see it.
And then as far as the belongings, these were the belongings photographed by the ME's office of Officer Christian. This is Stacy's exhibit, 11/19, 11/20, 11/21, and 11/22.
I'll just launch the foundation for those.
Yes, sir.
Let's see how this goes. Of course, you'll have an opportunity to object to those.
with these others in the record that
All right. Anything else before we see if the jury's ready to come back in?
No, Your Honor, not from the state.
Mr. Hood? We're ready to bring them in. Okay. See if they're ready. Let's turn the lights on until we get. I'll let you just hold on.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I'll let you introduce your witness.
Thank you.
Call it.
The state calls Dr. Eisenstadt. And sir, if you don't mind, we'll re-administer the oath from the jury. Please stand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony about presented before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so yeah.
I do.
Please be seated. If you would please state your full name and spell for us.
Jonathan Eisenstadt, Eisenstadt.
And Dr. Eisenstadt, where do you work?
I work at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
And what is your title?
I'm Deputy Chief Medical Examiner.
And what are some of your duties and responsibilities as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner?
So other than some administrative duties, I perform autopsies, I review call notifications of death, and essentially determine the cause and manner of why someone died.
And can you briefly describe your educational background that allows you to do what you did?
So after college, I went to medical school. After medical school, I did a 1.5 years of surgery internship. Then I did 3.5 years of anatomic or general pathology, which is if you go to the hospital and have surgery, whatever specimen they take, they send it to the pathologist, and we make the diagnosis. After that, I did a year of pediatric pathology fellowship, and then I did a year of forensic pathology fellowship, and then 1 more year of forensic neuro and cardiac pathology fellowship. During that time, I passed the national exams to be licensed as a physician, initially in the state of New York, and then when I moved to Georgia, in Georgia, as well as passed the national exams to be board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology.
And just very briefly, can you describe what is a forensic pathologist?
So a forensic pathologist is a medical doctor who determines why someone died. And that can be done by looking at medical records, looking at laboratory reports, or doing an autopsy. And an autopsy is really looking at an individual both outside and inside and seeing what natural disease, what trauma may have contributed to that individual's death.
And are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, I am.
And what are those?
I'm a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the United States and Canadian Academy of Pathology, Society for Cardiovascular Pathology, Society for Pediatric Pathology. I sit on a number of committees within those organizations, and I'm the chair of one of the committees.
And sir, have you published any articles or any writings?
I have.
And can you just briefly describe those?
I've published a few journal articles, some of which deal with injuries, trauma, some which deal with sudden unexpected death. I have currently written the chapter on forensic pathology in the big pediatric pathology book, which is in final editing and will be out in a few months. So it's an investigation into the deaths of children, babies, and teenagers. So it involves natural and traumatic, non-natural deaths. And then I've also written a number of chapters in what's to be the next big forensic book, but that's in the early phases.
And were any of these writings peer-reviewed by your colleagues in your field?
They're all peer-reviewed, yes.
And can you just briefly describe what that means when your colleagues are peer-reviewing our articles?
So that's just to assure that I don't write something crazy that makes absolutely no sense. So someone who is considered an authority within that specific field, they'll review whatever I wrote and make suggestions, corrections, or say this is unacceptable and we won't accept it to the journal or the book. And that's essentially peer review.
Thank you. Now, with regard to your experience, how long have you been a forensic pathologist?
So including my training and subsequent fellowship, I was a forensic pathologist for 2 years in New York, and then I've been down here for 9 years now, so 11 years cumulative.
And if I were to ask you just a ballpark figure, how many autopsies have you performed in your profession?
Somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000.
And What would be the percentage of those that involve gunshot wounds? If you know.
Yeah, percentage is a little difficult, but there's no doubt it's on the order of multiple hundreds.
And have you received any specialized training in the area of gunshot wounds?
Well, during our forensic pathology fellowship, that's one of the things we focus on, is injury analysis. We spend time at the crime scene unit and the ballistics unit, firing weapons, looking at the damage it can do and range of fire and things of that sort. It's a big part of our board exams, which I passed, and then I go to at least 2 national meetings a year where there's continuing medical education and journals that I read that keeps me up to date with all of the literature.
Have you ever testified before as an expert?
Yes.
How many times?
In Georgia, I'm probably around 150 now, something in that area.
And is it all across Georgia, or is it specific courts?
It's all across Georgia.
And what was the field of your expertise?
Forensic pathology.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to tender Dr. Jonathan Eisenstadt as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
Any objection? No, sir, no. Witness will be allowed to testify as an expert in the area of forensic pathology.
Now, Dr. Eisenstadt, as part of your duties as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Division of Forensic Sciences, did you perform autopsies on Officer Buddy Christian and an individual named Kenneth Omari Ray?
I did.
And starting with Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray, do you recall when you performed that autopsy?
That was on December 29th of 2010.
And before we get into the specific autopsy, let me ask you just a few questions on just basic principles of gunshot wounds. And I'd like to show you what's been marked as States Exhibits 1101 through 1105. Now, Doctor, looking at States Exhibits 1101 through 1105, would these slides assist you in explaining some basic principles regarding gunshot wounds and what you look for, and would this assist you in explaining to the jury?
Yes, I think so.
Your Honor, the state moves to tender States Exhibits 1101 through 1105 as demonstrative purposes only. So, Doctor, when we discuss gunshot wounds, can you differentiate or distinguish
1101 through 1105.
Can you, let me repeat that. When we're discussing gunshot wounds, can you distinguish or differentiate between an entrance wound and an exit wound? And I showed you States Exhibit 1101.
Yes, in the majority of cases, 99% of the time, we can distinguish between the two.
And how do you go about doing that?
Well, actually, as this image shows, when a bullet enters the body, it is going through the skin against pressure. There's tissue, there's bone, there's organs underneath the skin. And so it has to cut out that piece of tissue to get in. And so it punches out a hole, which you can see here, you end up with this hole in the center, and you can get a little bit of scratching around the side, or we call an abrasion around the side. An exit wound, if you think of the skin now, and it gets a little more difficult if they're against a solid surface, but a standard exit wound doesn't have anything on the other side that's really solid that it has to push against. So it'll pop the skin out, but not punch out a hole. So I'll be able to bring that skin back together, and the edges will reapproximate to each other. So that's two of the main ways. The other things we look for is we look for any type of gunpowder, which would obviously be around an entrance wound. We have some different characteristics of little tears around an exit wound. So there are a number of characteristics we look for.
Is there any way you can look at a hole in the skin and try to determine the caliber of a bullet? Is there any way you can do that?
No, the skin is very elastic, so you cannot correlate an injury to the caliber of the weapon or the bullet.
And once a bullet or projectile goes into the soft tissue, what effect does that have on the soft tissue? What's going on?
So what's happening is you have a bullet that's traveling at a very high velocity. When it hits any object, but if it hits the skin, you have a very large change in kinetic energy. And what will happen is you'll have what we call a temporary cavity. And that's why we see here that the injury isn't just a straight line. The bullet may go through in whatever direction, but the injury will be a cavity that's formed. So if you think about a bullet going into jello, you're not going to have a straight line going to that jello. You'll see the bullet come in, but it'll go out, cause damage to the cavity. Will go out and then come back, but everything that was in that cavity area will be damaged.
And do you have the ability when you're examining a gunshot wound to actually track the path or trajectory of that bullet?
Absolutely.
And do you note that typically in your reports?
Yes.
Now, do you also check for something that's called soot or gunshot residue, stippling, or fouling? Do you check for those things?
Yes, we do.
And can you explain to the jury what we're talking about that?
So when a weapon is fired, the gunpowder ignites. When it ignites, that pressure builds up and shoots out the bullet. Right after the bullet comes out, you have the burnt gunpowder because it's lighter and it's like soot. It's black smoke that will come out right after the bullet. Now there's still going to be, and that will leave, if it touches an object such as the skin, that'll leave that black powdery look around it, and we call that fouling. Now, not all the pieces of gunpowder are going to burn, so you'll have some unburnt gunpowder particles that are heavier, so they come out next. They're a little slower. And if that comes out close enough to the body and hits the body, it can cause little scrapes, and that's called stippling. And we use those to help us with a range of fire.
Okay. With regard to range of fire, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 1102. Are there general categories of range of fire?
Yes.
Well, what are those categories?
So you have contact range, which is what it sounds like. It's up against the body. So the end of the barrel is in contact with the individual. We have close range, and in close range, that's where we see that black soot, the fouling, and we may even see some searing or burning of the skin because it's so close that the hot gases can hit it. Then we go out a little further and we have intermediate. Intermediate range is where we see the stippling with or without some soot in there, but the stippling is definitely there. And then if we get out to another certain distance, there's no soot, fouling, stippling left on the skin or the clothing overlying the skin, and so it's indeterminate. And at that point, you can't say if it's 3 feet or if it's 20 feet away because there's no markers on the skin.
With regard to the state's exhibit 1103, can you tell us what we're doing in this?
So here, looking at this is showing images of a contact wound, and what you can see on this photograph here is what we call either a muzzle contusion or a muzzle stamp. Obviously, the only way you can get that is to have the weapon pressed up against the skin. When the weapon is fired, the gases, as it goes underneath the skin, will push the skin out, just natural, that cavity, and it'll cause a bruise, which is a contusion, in the pattern of the end of the weapon. This image is a little more difficult to see, but that is surrounding burning, but not any, it's burning and contusion, but not any real gunpowder residue on it.
And looking at State's Exhibit 1104, can you tell us what we're viewing in a close range of fire?
Sure. So now we see it's a tight circle. There's a hole in the center. I cannot put those edges back together because it's punched out as the entrance by the bullet. We have a margin around it that's burned. That's the hot gases. And then an area of soot or fouling that goes around it. Now, one of the ways I can distinguish that is it's soot, so I can wipe it off. And that's why I want to look at it before I do anything more to the body, and then I can wipe that area of soot off, and that'll tell me there's fouling.
And what is the distance approximately, or the range of distance in a close range gunshot?
Oh, you're within inches, 6 inches at the very most. It depends on the weapon and the load of the projectile, but it's within 6 inches at the most.
Now, State's Exhibit 1105. Can you tell us about intermediate range of fire?
So now we're moving outside that 6 inch or so range, and the burnt gunpowder is being dispersed in the atmosphere. But those heavier particles, and the particles are little round or little flat pieces of gunpowder, will hit the skin. And we see a tight area of stippling, but you can see the little dots that are sort of outlined here. That's all stippling. Now again, if I were to take a paper towel or my hand and try to wipe it away, I couldn't now because these are little scrapes on the skin that are caused by that gunpowder.
And what would be the distance, approximately, or range of distance of an intermediate range of fire gunshot?
So it can be as close as a couple inches out to maybe 18 inches or 2 feet. That's the general range. I would say 2 feet at the most, maybe a little bit more.
And when you get into the situation where there's absolutely no gunshot powder residue, no fouling, no stippling, nothing at all, is that beyond 3 feet or beyond?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, getting back to the autopsies you performed, and starting with Kenneth Omari Ray, can you just briefly describe the process that you kind of go through when you do perform an autopsy?
So in most of Georgia, it's a coroner system, such as in this county. So the coroner will report a death to our office. Our investigator will take the information and tell the coroner if that body needs to be brought in. If there's an injury such as this, in these cases, the body is obviously brought to our office for exam. When the body is initially brought in, it's weighed, and then it's x-rayed if there's the possibility of something entering the body. The x-ray is done to see if there's something in there, so we know where to look for evidence, and also to protect ourselves during the exam. That's all done with the body bag still sealed. We haven't touched anything. Then we'll move the body into the autopsy suite itself, open up the body bag, and we'll photograph the body from head to toe as that individual is received in our office. Nothing has been touched yet. That's again to preserve all evidence. Then what we'll do is if there's any therapy, we may remove that first. If there's clothing, we may remove that at the same time or around the same time. But in cases such as these two cases, everything will be documented by me first. I go head to toe and document the therapy, the clothing, if there's any defects in the clothing. Then after that is done, I'll go back to the body, I'll take all that off, then I'll go back to the body. And I again will go from head to toe. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking at everything from the hair color to any injuries or any natural disease I see on that individual. I will document all of that. We will photograph everything that I think is important, and then we'll move to the internal examination. The internal examination for a full autopsy involves looking inside the head, the neck, the chest, and the belly. If I need to, I'll go into the arms and legs. I will look for any natural disease that I see, any traumatic injury that I see, and if there's anything in the body that it will be needed for evidence, such as a bullet or a knife tip or something, I'll remove that and I'll submit it as evidence. After all of that's done, I dictate the case into a report. I review the report, and then I submit a finalized autopsy report.
Now, with regard to Kenneth Omari Ray, did you take measurements of his height and his weight?
I did.
And what was his height and weight?
He was 5 feet 10 inches, and he weighed 197 pounds.
And can you describe the condition of his body when he arrived at your office?
Well, he essentially didn't have any clothing really left on him. Clothing came with him, but it wasn't covering his whole body. And that's because he had been taken to the hospital and they attempted resuscitation. So we had a number of medical devices on his body. That's essentially how he was received.
Okay. And can you don't have to describe all of them, but can you describe a few of these medical devices that were in place on his body?
Sure. So the most important in this situation are chest tubes. So tubes that go into the chest to drain out any blood or fluid or air that has gotten in there. There was an incision in his chest, which is essentially a last-ditch effort. If the chest tubes aren't draining enough and the vital signs are not coming back, they can make a big incision and try to manually resuscitate him. Some electrocardiograph pads to see his heart rhythm, defibrillator pads to shock him if needed, and there were a few others as well.
All right. And could you just see, just based on your visual inspection, what sort of injuries he had sustained?
Yes.
And what were those?
He sustained multiple gunshot wounds to his neck, his torso, and his extremities.
All right. And do you recall how many gunshot wounds?
Well, there were 7 gunshot injuries, which correlates to more than 14 wounds, because one of them went in, and out again. So there were actually 16 defects in his body, which correlated to 7 gunshots.
And my math, 7 times 2 is 14. So was there an additional injury caused by one of the gunshot wounds?
Yes, one went in the arm, out the arm, in the chest, out the back.
And based on your examination, were there any projectiles located within Kenneth Omari Ray's body?
No, there were not.
Now, with regard to some of these medical devices that you observed when you arrived, what, if anything, did that suggest to you about this individual?
All that really tells me is that he must have had some vital signs at the scene, that he was not dead at the scene. Thus, they tried to resuscitate him and take him to the hospital.
Now, as part of the process that you earlier described, do you list and describe the clothing and the items that are associated either on the body or with the body?
Yes.
Okay. And in this case, did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And with regard to his clothing and personal effects, do you retain those as evidence?
Yes, what we do with the clothing is I'll remove the clothing, photograph it, sometimes, not all the time, but then we'll submit it into a drying cabinet. And that drying cabinet is a solo cabinet that has been sterilized and no other cases in there. Once the clothing is dried, if it's been blood soaked or blood stained, it'll then be taken over to the evidence receiving department and then dispersed to the right laboratory.
And in addition to noting and describing the different clothing, you actually physically inspect the clothing at burnout there.
Oh, absolutely.
And why do you do that?
Again, I'm looking to see if there's any evidence of defects. I'm looking to see if there's any evidence of evidentiary value, such as we may see that there's gunpowder on an article of clothing. We may see a hair that doesn't appear to be from that individual. So anything that we can find that may help with evidence.
And with regard to Kenneth Omari Ray, did you list his clothing that was actually retained as evidence?
Yes, I did.
And what were those items?
May I refer to my report?
Yes, sir.
So with him, we received 2 black shoes, 1 white sock, 1 pair of blue jean pants, 1 gray belt, which had a yellow metal and white metal buckle, 1 pair of black thermal underpants, 1 pair of red and white boxer shorts, 1 black short sleeve t-shirt, 1 black jacket, 1 penny, 1 yellow metal bracelet, and 1 black metal bracelet which had some pictures on it.
Now, with regard to the clothing, when you physically examined the clothing, did you notice any defects in the clothing?
Yes, there were a number of defects in the clothing, all of which corresponded to the gunshot wounds that I found on the body.
And just so I'm clear, as well as the jury, when we talk about defects, you're basically saying there's holes.
Right. I'm not talking about a defect in the manufacturing of the clothing. It's an actual defect that's caused by a projectile, and in this case, caused by bullets.
Did you happen to notice around any of these holes any gunshot powder residue, any stippling, any fouling that would suggest it was very close?
I didn't see any of that on the clothing.
Your Honor, if I could, I'd like to show Dr. Eisenstadt's State Exhibit 1146.
Tell me that number again.
1146. And do you recognize State's Exhibit 1146?
I do.
And what is it?
So after the clothing is dried, we package it up in a large brown bag, and that's when we take it over. So this brown bag is sealed with evidence tape. It has the case number for Mr. Ray, and then what we do is we list all of the articles of clothing that's inside that bag. So this is the bag containing the clothing that was brought in with Mr. Ray.
And if you don't mind, without showing it to the jury, could you just open the bag and look in there and see if those are the items that you earlier referred to?
open it sort of down here, it'll be a lot easier.
Yes, sir.
So inside the bag, each individual article is placed in another bag. Do you want me to open all the small bags or say what's in each one of these?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we needed to make sure that the items listed on the bag corresponds to.
Sure, no problem. So we have the white sock. The black t-shirt. Boxer shorts. The black thermal underpants. The two black shoes. The black jacket. And the blue jean pants with the belt.
Thank you, Doctor. And are all those items, the clothing items you described earlier as accompanying Mr. Kennedy Omari Ray's body?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time we'd like to tender State's Exhibit 1146.
Your objection. No, sir, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if we could just, one item, if you don't mind publishing it to the jury and showing the jury, would be the black t-shirt.
Okay. The rest can I put back in the...
Yes, sir.
You like me to take it out?
Yes. And if you could just direct our attention to any holes or defects that you refer to.
Can I stand up?
Yes, sir.
So, I don't know if you can see, but there's a number of holes here on the upper back area. There's 2 holes here. There's 3 holes over here. So those are the ones that really come to light immediately.
Thank you.
Should I put it back?
Yes, sir. Now, Dr. Eisenstadt, as part of your process in performing the autopsy, do you do generally an external examination first?
Yes.
Okay. And are you noting any type of injuries to the body?
Yes. Yes.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
And can you just briefly describe the injuries you saw and where they were located? This part of that.
So we had an entrance gunshot wound on the right side of the neck, which exited the left side of the neck. In the process, it hit one of the vertebrae in the neck, but didn't go into the spinal cord. We had an entrance and an exit on the back of the left shoulder. We had an entrance and an exit on the left forearm, which fractured the ulna, which is the bone that comes along down towards the pinky side. We had an entrance and an exit in the right posterior shoulder. We had an entrance in the right side that went through the liver, the diaphragm, the lung, and out the back. And then when it was going out the back, it fractured 2 ribs, the 6th and 7th ribs. We had a gunshot that went in the right buttock and came out in the middle of the right thigh. And we had a gunshot that went in the right arm, out the middle of the right arm, in through the right chest, and out the right back. And I think I missed one.
Okay. And did you make some sort of diagram or have an assistant sort of transcribe a diagram for you as you were noting these injuries?
Yes.
And let me show you State's Exhibit 1118. And do you recognize that item, Doctor?
I do.
And is that the diagram or chart you use to sort of chart these different wounds?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does it accurately portray the wounds you observed to Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray?
It does.
Now, at this time, we'd like to tender State's Exhibit 118.
Any objection?
No, sir, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, 1118. I'm just going. Showing you State's Exhibit 1118. This is sort of the diagram that was created to sort of note these different gunshot wounds.
Yes, it was.
Since there's so many entrance and exit wounds, if you can refer to that diagram, but at certain points during the presentation, if you just tell me where to point, I can sort of demonstrate to the jury where we're referring to, because this can be a little confusing to follow.
Sure.
Now, with regard to each individual injury, did you first of all take photographs of the injuries?
Yes.
And is that something you typically do as part of the autopsy?
Yes, we have a photographer that takes photographs under our direction.
If I may, I'd like to show you State's Exhibits 1106 through 1117, and I'll ask if you recognize the items. with regard to State's Exhibits 1106 through 1117, do these photographs fairly and accurately depict the injuries you observed during your autopsy of Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray?
Yes, they do.
Your statements that tender State's Exhibits 1106 through 1117.
Any objection?
No, sir, Your Honor.
It's already been done.
Yes, sir.
Number 4. Thank you. Before we start examining each gunshot wound specific to each one, is there a way that you are able to determine which gunshot wound occurred in which order?
No, not in a case like this. There are circumstances where that can happen, but no, I can't tell you which was first and which was last.
And for that reason, do you number the gunshot wounds?
Well, we label them for our own convenience in the sense that it helps us document the different wounds, but the order that they're in is just a random order.
And do you use letters instead of numbers?
Yes.
Sort of, so not to give the inference that a particular wound was first, second, or third.
Absolutely.
Now, with regard to gunshot wound that you labeled as A, can you describe, well, before we get there, are there a couple of photographs that you take prior to photographing the injuries?
Well, we do an identification photograph of everyone, and then we also photograph the body from head to toe prior to removing anything.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 1106. Can you tell us what that photograph represents?
That's our identification photograph of Mr. Ray. You can see the case number at the bottom, which sticks with everything that goes with this case. This is done after I've documented the injuries, and then I clean the body and the face, and then we do the photograph.
And with regard to gunshot wound A, where is gunshot wound A located on Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray?
So it's in the neck. The entrance is on the right side of the neck, and the exit's on the left side.
So the entrance right side of the neck, exit left side.
Correct.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 1107. Can you tell us what we're viewing in this photograph?
So right here is entrance gunshot wound A. We also see two wounds here on the back of the right shoulder, which correspond with each other. And I believe that is gunshot wound D, as in David.
And showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1108.
So this is the exit to gunshot wound A, just below the left ear.
Now, with regard to this specific gunshot wound, would you characterize it as life-threatening?
No, not this one.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, it didn't damage any internal structure that would have been lethal or could have led to death. It hit the spine, but it did not damage the large vessels, and it did not damage the spinal cord.
And did it fracture any of the vertebrae?
Yeah, so this, where it hit on the spine was the third cervical vertebrae, so it's 3 down from the base of the skull.
And did you note the trajectory of this one?
Yes.
And what was the trajectory of the path of the river?
Well, the trajectory was essentially from right to left. It had very minimal other deviation.
And were you able to determine a range of fire of this particular gunshot wound?
This gunshot wound was indeterminate range because there was no evidence of burnt or unburned gunpowder.
And can you tell us, tell the court about gunshot wound B?
So gunshot wound B is on the back of the left shoulder. There are 2 wounds. The entrance wound is a little more out towards the back of the shoulder, and the exit wound is a little bit more towards the middle of the back.
So it would be in the back of the left shoulder.
Yes, sir.
And I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1109. And can you tell us what we're viewing in this photograph?
So now he's been rolled over. So that's, he's face down. So we're looking at the left shoulder, the back of the left arm, and the upper left back. And we have entrance wound B, exit wound B.
And would you characterize this gunshot wound as life-threatening?
No, this gunshot wound just went through the soft tissues.
And did you track the path of the bullet or the trajectory?
Yes.
And can you describe that?
So this bullet went from left to right and had a little bit of a downwards, so going towards the feet, but very minimal. So essentially left to right, slightly downwards.
And were you able to determine the range of fire with this particular gunshot wound?
This was as well indeterminate.
And just so we're clear, when you say indeterminate, you mean you can't determine?
I cannot determine how far away the weapon was.
And can you describe gunshot wound C?
So the entrance for gunshot wound C is on the forearm, on the pinky side, and the exit is sort of near the bend of the left elbow.
And I'm showing you State's Exhibit 1110. And can you tell us what this photograph depicts?
So this is the hospital band, or the, not the hospital band, yes, the hospital band ID band down here. So that's his wrist. His shoulder would be over here. His elbow is right here. So this is the entrance wound to gunshot wound C.
And State's Exhibit 1111.
So this is the crease where you would bend the elbow, and this is an exit wound for gunshot wound C.
And with regard to gunshot wound C, or the third gunshot wound, did you characterize this as life-threatening?
No, this is one that would be painful in the sense that it fractured or broke the left ulna, which is the bone that runs along this side, but it would not be life-threatening.
And did you note the path or trajectory of this gunshot wound?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
It was upwards and slightly back to front. And just to mention, when we, as pathologists, talk about the directionality, we're looking at a body that's lying on a table on its back with the arms down by its side and the palms facing up. So on the individual's body, those are the directionalities that I'm speaking of.
And were you able to determine how far away the shooter was from Mr. Omari Ray with this gunshot wound?
This as well was indeterminate.
And can you describe gunshot wound D, or the fourth gunshot wound that you noted?
So that's what we saw in one of the first pictures, the two bullet holes in the back of the right shoulder.
Is that State's Exhibit 1107?
Yes, these two perforations right here.
And is that the entrance and exit wounds?
Yes, it is.
And did you characterize this, or would you characterize this as a life-threatening gunshot wound?
No, this only went through the soft tissues.
And can you differentiate which one's the entrance and which one's the exit?
Yes, the entrance wound is here, and the exit wound is here, giving a pathway of right to left and slightly back to front.
And were you able to determine how far away the shooter was?
No, this is as well as indeterminate range.
And can you please describe State's Exhibit, gunshot wound E, or the fifth gunshot wound you noted?
So gunshot wound E is the gunshot wound that entered over on the right side of the torso. It went through the liver, the diaphragm, and the right lung, and exited out the back.
What was the last sentence you had up there? On E?
States Exhibit 1107.
What was E?
D.
Okay.
Now, with regard to gunshot wound E, or the fifth gunshot wound that you know, I'm showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 112. I'm sorry, 1112. Can you tell us more viewing in this picture?
So this is a close-up, but this is the entrance on the right side of the chest.
And States Exhibit 1113. Can you tell us what we're viewing here?
Sure. So now we're looking at his back, the head obviously this way. This is his left side, this is his right side, and we can see two perforations here. These are both exit wounds. This wound right here is the exit wound for gunshot wound E.
And with regard to this particular gunshot wound, and I'll put this back, how did you characterize this one?
Characterized for, can you range of fire? Or?
No, I mean as far as, was it life-threatening, not life-threatening?
Well, this was life-threatening. This is actually the bullet that killed him.
Okay. And can you describe the path of the bullet and the destruction that occurred?
Sure. So after it went through the right side of the torso, it went into the liver. And as we were talking about with that temporary cavity, it didn't just put a little straight line through the liver. The terminology I use is pulpefaction. It's sort of taking that whole area and pulpifying it, like in a blender, so that whole area is damaged. After it went through the liver sits right underneath the diaphragm. It went through the right side of the diaphragm, and right above that diaphragm and behind it is the right lung. So it went through the right lung, and then it went out the back, and as it went out the back, it fractured the 6th and 7th ribs in the back.
Now, with regard to this projectile, did it deprive Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray of the use of his liver?
Yes.
And why is the liver important? What does it do in our body?
Well, the liver has a number of functions. One of them is the production of protein. It filters your blood and breaks down or metabolizes certain drugs, certain things that are in your body. If you don't have your liver, your whole system will become altered, again, because the proteins are so important in the way the fluids in the body are kept in a good homeostasis, is what we say. So you need it to build protein, to digest things, to break down toxins in your body.
And did this bullet projectile also deprive Kenneth Omari Ray of the use of his diaphragm?
Yes.
And why is the diaphragm important?
The diaphragm is one of the muscles that is responsible for breathing. So when you take a deep breath in, your diaphragm will expand or flatten out so your lungs can expand and fill with oxygen. If you don't have your diaphragm, that part of your chest and abdomen will not breathe appropriately.
And did this bullet projectile also deprive Mr. Kenneth Omari Ray of the use of his right lung?
Yes, the damage through the right lung would have taken that area and essentially filled it with blood and brought air into the chest cavity, which would really damage or interrupt the way that he would breathe.
And could you please describe to the jury the directionality of this particular gunshot?
So this gunshot wound went from right to left, from his front to his back, and downwards.
And were you able to determine the range of fire, the distance between him and the shooter?
This as well was indeterminate range.
And next gunshot wound F, or the sixth wound that you noted. Can you describe that one?
So that bullet entered in the right buttock, went through the thigh, and exited out the medial or mid side of the right thigh.
So it entered back in the buttocks,
Other side.
other side, back in the buttocks, and it exited out the thigh.
Correct.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1114. Can you tell us what we're doing here?
If we move the picture down a little bit, the orientation may be, this is the buttock, the right buttock cheek here, and this is the entrance gunshot wound for gunshot F, or excuse me, F.
And with regard to the State's Exhibit 1115, which is the cover of genitals, can you tell us what we're doing here?
So now he's been rolled over, and that's why the right side is over here now. And this is the exit gunshot wound that corresponds with the entrance, which is on the buttock over here.
Now, with regard to this particular gunshot wound, did you consider it a life-threatening gunshot wound?
No, this only went to the soft tissues.
And can you describe the path or trajectory of this gunshot wound?
So this bullet went from right to left and downwards.
And were you able to determine the range or distance between the shooter and the victim?
This as well is indeterminate.
And lastly, gunshot G, or the seventh gunshot wound that you had. Can you just on that?
So I showed the wrong side when you first asked me. It's actually on the left side. And this is an entrance gunshot wound that goes in the left arm, out the medial part of the left arm near the armpit, back in on the lateral aspect of the left chest, and then out the back.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1116. Can you tell us what we're viewing or what this picture depicts?
So this is entrance gunshot wound G. This is the left arm, and this is the armpit right here.
And showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1117. What is that photograph depict?
So he's still face down. So this is the left side, and this would be the right. This is the exit gunshot wound coming out of the medial aspect of the left arm. And it's difficult to see here, but can sort of see a darker area there. That's what we call the re-entry. So it's a re-entrance of the gunshot wound into the left side of the chest.
And showing you what we've already viewed in State's Exhibit 1113, can you show us where the second exit wound was?
So this is the exit wound for G. For orientation, the entrance would be here, the exit would be there, the re-entry would be there, and the exit would be right there.
And did you consider this a life-threatening injury?
No, this would as well be painful because of the fracture. It goes through the humerus, which is a big bone in the upper arm, but it didn't damage any major vasculature. So this would not be life-threatening.
And did you know the path or trajectory of this gunshot?
Yes.
And what was that?
It's left to right, front to back, and downwards.
Now, were you able to determine the distance or the range of fire with this particular gunshot?
No, this as well is indeterminate.
Now, when you're sort of considering all of these gunshot wounds, as a whole, how many of these gunshot wounds were actually to the back of Kenneth Omari Ray?
Well, there were 3 entrance gunshot wounds to the back.
Would that be consistent with someone who is chasing someone else and the person being shot fleeing from the shooter?
It could be, yes.
Now, as part of your examination, did you perform an internal examination of Mr. Omari Ray?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
Well, other than all the injuries that we've already discussed, there was no underlying natural disease of any sort.
Okay. Now, as a result of your training and experience in the autopsy that you performed on Mr. Omari Ray, did you form an opinion as to the manner and cause of death of Mr. Omari Ray?
I did.
And to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what was that opinion?
Well, the cause of death was a gunshot wound of torso with perforations of liver and right lung, and the manner of death is homicide.
Now, I don't know if I may have neglected to ask you, when was this particular autopsy performed? What was the date?
Yes, this was December 29th of 2010.
A few months later, did you perform another autopsy on Officer Elmer Christian?
I did.
And what was the date of that autopsy?
That was March 23rd of 2011.
And where was this performed?
This was as well performed at the GBI headquarters in Decatur.
And did you measure his height and his weight?
I did.
And what was those measurements?
He was 5 feet 11 inches tall, and he weighed 235 pounds.
And can you describe the condition of Officer Elmer Christian when he arrived at your office?
Well, he was fully clothed. There was no medical intervention on him, and he was in his uniform.
And ask if you could identify these photographs. I'm sorry, 1119 through 1134. And ask if you could identify these photographs. The injuries to Elmer Christian on those photographs fairly and accurately depict the injuries to Elmer Christian on the date that you performed the autopsy as well as his personal belongings.
Yes, I do.
On the statements and tender states exhibits 1119 through 1133.
Not other than my earlier one.
Doesn't matter. Thank you.
You indicated before you identified these photographs that you observed no medical intervention. Does that say anything to you with regard to Officer Christian?
That says to me that he was essentially deceased when either EMS or paramedics arrived.
And at some point, did you note the injuries to Officer Christian?
Yes, I did.
And what were those injuries?
So there were 2 gunshot wounds, 3 perforations to his body, which corresponded to 2 gunshot wounds, 1 entrance and exit in the neck, and then 1 entrance in the left side of the chest, where the bullet did not exit and it lodged in his body. There were other injuries as well, which involved what we call pseudo-stippling on the face, as well as on the right arm, and those were all the injuries I noted.
Now, as with the previous autopsy, did you note what Officer Christian was wearing in his personal belongings?
Yes.
And can you briefly describe what those were?
So he was in his uniform, so he had a shirt, he had with his badge and his belt containing, I believe, a flashlight and some other objects, handcuffs. He was wearing pants, shoes, socks. Underneath the uniform shirt, there was a vest, a bulletproof vest. Under that was a black T-shirt. Those are the main points that I recall him wearing.
And did you also note any personal effects?
Yes, well, there were the personal effects that we document really have to do with his identification badge. He had some keys. There was a weapon with some unspent bullets. And I believe there are probably a few more, but I would need to look back at my report.
With regard to his personal belongings, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 147, 148, 149, and 150. And I'll ask you, Doctor, if you could, if you recognize those four items.
I do.
And what are those four items?
So these are those bags the brown paper bags that we've placed smaller bags inside from the clothing and some of the personal effects from the autopsy of Officer Christian.
And can you just, if you don't mind, without showing to the jury at this point, just verify that those were the items you just previously described?
Yes. So when we have more than one bag, we label them bag one of, in this case, there's 4 bags. So in bag 1 of 4, we have his bulletproof vest. Can I get down? I need to take it out. And in addition to the bulletproof vest is a headset. Bag 2 are his uniform pants, a black belt, and then another belt that contains multiple holsters for either weapons or flashlights, etc. Within bag 3, there are 2 more bags. One of which contains his 2 black shoes. And the other bag contains his uniform shirt, and within the uniform shirt are still retained his notepad, a flash drive, a whistle, a key, 3 pens, multiple cards, and a card holder. And then in bag number 4, there are 10 smaller bags. One containing a pair of handcuffs. Another with blue boxer shorts. Another with 2 purple gloves. One with a black tank top. One with 2 black and green socks. One with another pair of handcuffs. bandana. One containing 4 white suspenders. One with a black flashlight. And one with a black gun holster.
Thank you, Doctor. Are these the items you previously described?
Yes, they are.
And are these the items that Officer Christian was wearing at the time you performed the autopsy?
Yes, yes, they are.
Your Honor, the state moves the tender states exhibits 1147, 1148, 1149, and 1150.
Any objection? Yeah, Judge, I do have objection because I'm trying to figure out what the purpose. We know why we're here. Are we here for his closing of what we're here for?
Your Honor, that's not an appropriate objection.
Anything else? Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out the relevance. What's the relevance of all these closing, all the items, what they have to do with why we're here?
Objection as well, objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. If you would you mind publishing just 2 of the items to the jury? You may stand up. Officer Christian's uniform shirt and Officer Christian's vest.
Vest?
Yes, sir.
One of the pens fell out of the shirt. Just wanted to make note of that.
And can you note where the defect or the hole is?
The defect in the shirt is just outside of the left breast pocket.
Thank you, sir. And did you, Doctor, did you inspect the clothes? Were you able to see any soot or any stippling or gunshot powder?
I did inspect it, and there was no soot, fouling, or stippling.
And let me ask you a couple questions about that. Number one is, if a projectile were to pass through another object before striking Officer Christian, such as glass, would that inhibit gunpowder residue from attaching to the clothing?
Yes, it would.
Okay. And with that kind of material, a police uniform shirt, is that the kind of material that is easily wiped away? Or does that kind of material clean, does gunshot powder residue clean with that kind of material?
Well, when a material is woven, so you have like little depressions in it, you have a better chance of any particles being stuck inside of that type of material.
Now, with regard to the vest, can you display that as well?
This came right, this came
Now, did you have the opportunity to inspect this bulletproof vest?
I did.
And did you notice any defects or holes in the vest?
In the vest, no.
And at any point, did you notice whether the cap of the projectile that ultimately caused Officer Christian's death had ever passed through this vest?
It never touched the vest.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question about the uniform shirt. I'm going to hold that up one more time. About the uniform shirt. In the event a uniform shirt on a police officer is sort of hastily cut off and thrown in an emergency room floor in a trauma situation, could that interfere with your ability to do a gunshot or residue examination?
If it's cut off and sort of thrown to the side while they're trying to resuscitate, yes, it can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doctor. My next question involves some of the personal effects that you described earlier. I'm showing you what's been tendered as State's Exhibit 1119. And can you tell the court what's depicted in this photo?
So we have a number of keys. We have a ring. We have a knife, a watch, and then his police badge with a number of cards in the billfold.
And State's Exhibit 1120.
So this is a close-up of his police badge as well as his driver's license and some other cards inside.
And State's Exhibit 1121, what are we doing here?
So here we have a revolver with 5 projectiles.
And was this revolver on his body when he arrived at the medical examiner's office?
It was with him, yes.
And do you know whether it's common or not for our police officers to carry second weapons in the event of primary weapon malfunction?
I've been told it is, yes.
And with regard to these rounds of ammunition, did you take a photograph of the tops or the heads of this ammunition?
Well, we took photographs of the bases here, and the reason that I did that is because I thought it was important to show that none of them had actually been discharged.
And do you recall where the revolver was located?
I honestly don't recall where it was.
Okay. Now, these particular items, did you return them to the family, or were they retained in evidence?
The majority of the items retained in evidence. There were a few items that were released to an agent to give back to the family.
Now, with regard to your the autopsy process, did you perform an external examination?
Yes.
Okay. And other than the injuries you've already described, did you note anything else?
No, everything else was unremarkable.
And prior to beginning your autopsy, did you take some overall pictures and identification for each picture and preserve how Officer Christian arrived at your office?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1124. Can you tell us what is depicted in this photograph?
So this is one of the overall photographs, and it captures the upper portion of his body exactly as it was received in our office.
In State's Exhibit 1123.
So as we saw in the prior case, this is after I've done my external examination, I've cleaned the face, and this is the identification photograph.
Now, regarding the specific analysis of each gunshot wound, starting with gunshot A, can you describe that gunshot wound?
So that gunshot wound entered on the left side of his neck and went through the soft tissues, did not hit anything, and exited at the back of, sort of almost in the mid of his neck, in the back.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1125. Can you tell us what this photograph depicts?
So in this case, I took a photograph with the clothing still on to show that there's a line of demarcation where we have the pseudo-stippling. It's not stippling like we talked about for intermediate range. It looks similar, but it has differences to show that it's not an intermediate range gunshot wound. And then behind the left ear is where we can start to see the entrance wound for gunshot wound A.
So just to clarify what you're saying, Doctor, these marks that go this up the side of Officer Christian and over here, are these marks caused by gunpowder?
No, these are not.
What is causing these marks?
Those marks are caused by the driver's side window when it shattered out. If you think of a motor vehicle accident and the glass breaks, these are the little abrasions that you see that helps tell you what side of the vehicle, if the person was the driver or not. We call that dicing injury. You can see that these are not those small little dots that we saw in the diagram earlier of stippling. There's a variety in the shape. Some are larger, some are smaller. So this is pseudo-stippling, which means it sort of looks like stippling, but it's from an intermediary target, in this case, the glass from the window.
In State's Exhibit 1126, what are we doing in this photograph?
So we've turned his head a little bit now so we can identify the entrance gunshot wound better and also look at the pseudo-stippling. But here we see the entrance gunshot wound for gunshot wound A.
In State's Exhibit 1127.
So now he's been rolled over. This is his back. The midline would be right here, and this is the exit gunshot wound, which is just to the right of the midline of the back of his neck.
Now, with regard to this particular gunshot wound, would you characterize it as life-threatening?
No, this only went to the soft tissues without hitting any vital structures.
In the fact that it went through soft tissue and didn't strike anything, did this projectile in any way get deviated off its path after striking the body?
Right, it did not deviate off a path once it struck the body.
And did you note the path or trajectory?
Yes.
Or what was that?
It was left to right, front to back, and downwards.
And did you note any gunpowder residue, any stippling, or any fouling?
No, sir.
And were you able to determine the range of fire for this particular gunshot?
This gunshot wound was indeterminate range.
Can you please describe in force the second gunshot wound you noted, or gunshot wound B?
So the second, or gunshot wound B, entered through the left chest. It went through the uniform shirt, the black undershirt, which was beneath the vest. It went through the skin on the left side of the chest, fractured the left fifth rib, went through the lung, the diaphragm, the stomach, the aorta, which is the biggest artery in the body, and then it lodged in the 10th thoracic vertebrae, which is the 10th one in the chest, towards the bottom of the chest.
I'm showing what's been marked in State's Exhibit 1128. Can you tell us what this photograph depicts?
So this depicts the entrance wound on the left chest as it goes through the uniform shirt.
And State's Exhibit 1129.
So in this case, I take off the clothing one layer at a time, and you can see here, this is the outline of his bulletproof vest. This is the black undershirt, and here is the continuation of this is what I would call a defect or perforation in the undershirt.
So with regard to the path or trajectory, does this round go underneath that bulletproof vest?
Yes, it does.
And State's Exhibit 1130.
So now
That's what we're doing here.
Sorry. Now I've removed all the clothing. I've already looked to see if there's any stippling or any fouling, and then I've cleaned off the body, and now we've taken a clean photograph of the entrance wound on the left side of his chest.
And with regard to the damage that this particular projectile did it deprive Officer Christian of the use of his left lung?
Yes, it did.
Did this bullet or projectile deprive Officer Christian of the use of his diaphragm?
Yes, it did.
Did this bullet or projectile deprive Officer Christian of the use of his brain by depriving his brain of oxygenated blood?
Yes, that's the injury to the aorta. The aorta is the artery that comes out of the heart to supply oxygen to the rest of the body. And if you have an injury to the aorta, the blood will go out into the body cavities rather quickly, and so the loss of blood to the brain would result in lack of oxygen, because that's what the blood's carrying, and that's the process.
Now, as a result of the autopsy, did you physically examine the aorta?
Yes.
And can you just briefly describe the nature of the aorta, where it's located, and what it kind of looks like?
So the aorta comes off what we call the base, which is actually the top part of the heart, and it goes up a little bit in the mid-chest, and then it curves over to the left. That's on the person's body, so over to the left on the body, and then essentially just runs down all the way down until it gets to the pelvis, and it runs just along the left side of the spine. So that's why a bullet that enters into the left chest, as it goes through, if it's going right towards the spine, it can hit the aorta in its directionality there.
And is the aorta the largest blood vessel in your body?
Yeah, it's the largest artery and the strongest pumping.
I'm showing you what's been marked in State's Exhibit 1131.
So this is a portion of the aorta that we can see the hole or the bullet perforation that went through. Just to give orientation, all of the yellowish looking area, what I've done is I've cut along the aorta and then splayed it open. So we're looking at the inside of the aorta right now. These little dots are little arteries that come out and supply the spine and other areas. That is a bullet hole in the aorta, and this this red that's around the sides, that's all blood that leaked out into the little bit of soft tissues that I left on the aorta itself.
Now, when the aorta is perforated in this manner, how long, in your opinion, would someone have to live?
You could live on the order of seconds. I would not go out into minutes. The reason being is at first, it will get into these soft tissues if it's in the right location, and you do have a little bit of residual oxygen in your brain, but he could survive on the order of a number of seconds.
And did you know the trajectory of the bullet in this particular gunshot?
I did.
And what was that?
It was as well left to right, front to back, and downwards.
And were you able to determine the range of fire, the distance between the shooter and Officer Grisham?
This as well was an indeterminate range.
Now, you indicated that this particular bullet that we were just discussing actually lodged in the spine.
Correct.
Did you have an occasion to take an X-ray?
Yes, we always x-ray these individuals before we start.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1132, I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Can you tell us what we're viewing this X-ray?
It's a little difficult to see, but oops, let's go out a tiny bit more where we were saying.
Okay.
Right there. So this is, you can see the ribs or the lines coming this way. This is the spine, and if you follow the spine down, you see here there's a darker white or a brighter white little dot. That's the bullet.
And did you have an occasion to remove that particular bullet from Officer Elmer Ray?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe that process?
So after I follow the track and what it injured, if there's still a bullet in the body, I'll recover it. If it's in the spine, I'll have to clean around the spine because we don't want to damage the actual bullet itself if it's needed for ballistics analysis or firearms. So I was able to remove the bullet without damaging it. It was, I don't give the exact caliber that's left of firearms, but it was a medium to large caliber bullet. It was copper jacketed and it was moderately deformed.
And when you say moderately deformed, what do you mean by that?
So a non-deformed would mean it just looks exactly like it did when it was fired. Slightly deformed, really those are, the tip of the bullet may have like a little dent in it. Moderately deformed means you can still see the general outline of it, but it may have started to mushroom or push back. And then markedly deformed means it's sort of ripped apart and I can't say much more than that.
Okay. Did you retain this bullet or projectile as evidence?
Absolutely.
And what did you do with the bullet or projectile?
So whenever I remove a projectile, I will put it into a plastic container. That plastic container will then be sealed inside of a plastic bag. All of this has the label for the case on it. After being sealed, initials will be placed on it, and then it will be submitted with the other evidence to evidence receiving, and then they will distribute it to the correct laboratory.
If I may, Your Honor, I'd like to show Dr. Eisenstadt State's Exhibit 1151. Dr. Eisenstadt, do you recognize that item?
I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is the projectile that I removed from Officer Christian.
And are your initials up here on the box and on the packaging?
Yes, I do.
And is that the bullet you removed from Officer Elmer?
It is.
Your Honor, statements that tender State's Exhibit 1151.
Any objection? No, sir, Your Honor.
Now, once you retained this as evidence and placed it in the packaging, what did you do next with the bullet? And how does that get back to an exam?
So we take it over to directly from the autopsy suite. over to the evidence receiving department, which is within the GBI itself. It is then placed in a lockbox, and on the other side is an evidence receiving individual. They will take it, log it, and then from that point on, I have nothing to do with it anymore. It's law enforcement or someone, whoever requests a test to be done. The projectile from there is sent to the firearms department, and then they wait to hear about a request for testing.
Now, did you observe, in addition to the gunshot wounds, I think you described some other pseudo-stippling on another part of the body. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we already spoke about what we saw on the left side of the face, but then if you look at the right arm, right near where you have, again, that bend of the elbow, there was pseudo-stippling right there as well.
And I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1133. And can you tell us what we're viewing in this photograph?
So this is the right side of his body. This is his right armpit. His uniform shirt essentially stopped right here, and this whole area right here is pseudo-stippling. Again, you can see how there's a large variety in the size of these little scrapes, which again goes to the fact that it's not true stippling.
Now, with regard to an internal examination, what were your findings?
Other than the trauma, there was no other significant finding.
Now, before I ask you your opinion as to the manner and cause of death of Officer Christian, let me ask you this. In general, is it difficult to form an opinion or describe the position of a shooting victim? Can that be difficult?
It can be difficult.
And can you explain to the jury why that is?
So what I'm looking at is an individual's body lying down on the table, and I can say how the bullet moved or its trajectory within the body and what it damaged. There are multiple scenarios out in the real world of how that bullet entered the body, and I'll tell you how it went through the body, but the actual incident, I can be given scenarios and say, yes, it would fit that, or no, it wouldn't, but I can't tell you exactly what happened, because many of these are dynamic situations, two individuals moving.
And as part of the issue during the shooting incident, that both the shooter and the person getting shot are both moving at the same time?
Most often, yes.
Okay. Now, what about a situation where the person who is being shot, if they're in a confined or small place, does it make it easier for you to kind of draw some conclusions based on the injuries you observed?
Absolutely.
Okay. You had an opportunity to view photos from this case at the crime scene.
I've seen photos, yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 290. And I'd ask, do you recognize this particular photo?
I do.
Okay. And is this one of the photos that you reviewed?
Yes, it is.
Now, in this area of the car, is there a lot of room for the officer to move about?
No, if the door is closed, definitely not.
Okay. And if the door is closed and the window is up, does that kind of give you an indication where his position was?
Yes, I mean, he was either sitting or, for whatever reason, if he's lifting up, he only has a few inches between his head and the roof.
And showing you State's Exhibit 305, can you see the wound to his neck in this particular photograph?
Yes, I can.
Now, are you aware in reviewing some of the other photos where that bullet actually lodged inside the car?
Yes, I am.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 458. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
And can you indicate where that bullet ended up after it passed through the neck?
The bullet ended up right here on the medial aspect of the front right passenger seat.
Now, when you correlate what you observed as the trajectory through the neck, what conclusions, if any, do you draw from where that bullet actually ended up?
Well, I can...
Colors in angle of trajectory.
Well, the bullet entered into the vehicle, into his body, and down, so it was going downwards. There's no doubt about that. It was coming from his left to his right, so it's coming from the driver's side window, or the driver's side of the vehicle. So the left side of the vehicle. The weapon has to be pointed downwards to get the trajectory that goes through his body to end up in the seat right there. What I can say is that it wasn't coming from behind the vehicle, it wasn't coming from directly in front of the vehicle. It was coming from the side, the left side where the driver would sit.
Okay. Now, with respect to the stippling on the right arm, with the stippling on the right arm, if he's sitting in a driver's seat, would that stippling be consistent with his arm being in this position when he was shot?
There's speculation.
Well, Your Honor, he's an expert. He's viewed the injuries. I'm just asking, would that be consistent? Well, let me ask you this. Did you form any opinion as to the location of his right arm?
Well, I think that his right arm could have been in a couple of different positions to receive that pseudo-stippling in that location.
Okay. And was the pseudo-stippling mostly on the inner part of the arm?
Yes.
Now, with respect, as a result of your training and experience in the autopsy you performed, did you form an opinion as to the cause and manner of death of Officer Elmer Buddy Christian?
Yes, I did.
And what was that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
So his cause of death was gunshot wounds of chest with perforation of aorta. His manner of death was homicide.
Thank you, sir. One moment. Nothing further. Thank you.
You don't want to step back there before we do proper cross-examination. Anybody need to take a break? Thank
You don't want to.
If I may ask, what your plan tonight? I don't plan to go any further than this witness. We had two witnesses. That's what I was trying to do.
You've got two others, and that's it. Is that?
That's what I keep saying. And that's it'll take a little while.
I think they, even though they'll always start, I think they've still been out all day. So we'll finish with this witness, is my intention, and then we'll pick it back up.
Yes.
So you get released.
Yes.
Thank you.